Okay, so we are talking about issues and approaches when we're dealing with mass housing, but in a kind of a context which actually makes the discussion a bit easier, because I believe that we all would believe certain kind of beliefs about integration of fellow human being and nature within our life cycle and proximity of our living environment. So I believe it has taught us the idea of frugality, sustainability, equity, and many plurality, etc. Many ETs have been, I think, experienced by us. And what we've learned is that we are a microcosm of the cosmos, and that means living with nature rather than mastering the nature that we were very much in the race of. And what we also saw is that, we have always thought that, okay, this planet has been overpopulated and there's nothing that it can do or we can do. We've already lost that threshold. But same number of people on the planet, but when certain undue systems were off at that point in time, we could see that nature corrected itself, whether it was an index of air quality, whether it was water, whether it was visibility, and whether it was also the fellow creatures who could also share the same environment which we lived in, which otherwise had become a territorial game. So how do we turn this constraint into a virtue? And this, in that sense, becomes a pause point to think for the kind of vision we had been creating for our cities and in therefore by default our living environments. And that was meant to be a smart move as a smart city. But if this happens to be the kind of cover page image of these programs in the government system, one wonders, is this really an idea of a smart? Is it a slogan or is it a vision? And if that is the kind of vision, then we wonder, have our cities all along been dumb? Is tradition anti-modernity? Is this the face of new India? Is progress misconstrued to be a growth? And is West the best? So these are the kind of doubts that we have. So what does a development need to entail? And understand that in today's formula of development, there's more and more urban-rural divide, this idea of other infrastructural systems, affordable housing, housing deficits, so qualitative and quantitative. In the name of race or making up for the quantity, we have forgotten the very essence of living environment, the qualitative dimensions of it, etc. The disparity has been growing quite considerably. And these figures tell you what has been the deficit. 24.7 million housing households are still required to be put across. So with all that, what are the kind of challenges and realities within which we need to consider the design? So, but this is just an acknowledgement of the complexity and the number of challenges we have. But as a student, as a kind of young mind, it is not to start with disappointment and the frustration. On the contrary, it is with a challenge accepted to say that can there be a win-win solution? Like Gandhi gave us once, that Gandhi was not only about freedom from Britain. He said that you would also be a slave if you are not self-reliant, then the macho husband would also bully you, and also a slumlord or a village lord would also exploit you. So with a single kind of one or two idioms, something like charkha, he ensured gender empowerment, he ensured rural empowerment, he ensured the economic equity, and so on and so forth. And with the sanitation and many things. So he went to sort of a seed of things. He tried to change the DNA of a system to ensure his contribution has been multifold, from safe sanitation to affordable education to economic empowerment to rural upliftment to social integration to gender equity. He was after sanitation only to say that we call people untouchable. The root cause of untouchability is that those who clean after you are the ones you call untouchable, which should be actually you have to clean yourselves, So just if we find a system by which if you don't need the scavengers and so on and so forth, then that discrimination would not happen. So that's how is the point here, that can we go to the roots of things, where if we try and address that, then a lot of other things would already be positive or benefited by that. This is just a reminder that the image on the left-hand side is where you don't need to give an address of A upon 3 by 2, as a house address. We can always identify each house through its character. So there was an identity, there was a home. That home created a community, and community put together, the neighborhoods put together, became a living environment. Can we say the same of the image on the right-hand side? Often people, neighbors living on the same floor also don't know each other. And it is not a personal attitude. A lot of it could be changed through design. So that's where what we are keep trying to keep it. Don't worry, who are we today? Don't fool yourself. We have changed so much just because of smartphone. But as human, we are the same. And what are those dimensions at human plane can we try and include in our design equation, that we can create a quality of environment where we could make a difference through design. And here is one very, very pertinent example. Just an idea of a lane, a small, narrow lane. You can see on the left-hand side is as narrow a lane, but as the picture shows, that there is a house front to that, which means that it's not a dead alley. And as a result, as also the picture witnesses, that it is ready to celebrate some festivity, may it be Eid, may it be Bharat, may it be whatever. As against the picture in the middle is a newly planned settlement, and there is a gap left between the two back-to-back houses for services to run. So it is actually meant to be an improved solution with this, environmental street, so to say. But as you see the design flaw, that there is a kind of a window at the back of that house, which is a passive interface, where arguably there would be a kitchen and everybody throws their muck out of that window into that back alley, which is just a dead space. And as a result, what should have been the positive environment to improve the quality of environment is element to improve that has actually become responsible for degenerating that environment. Now, if you simply, in terms of design awareness, change that window into a door, arguably you would have an image like on the right-hand side, extreme right, where it would be positive space. Nobody would make complaints about what's happening at the back, because both neighbors at the back and side would have mutually divided the space as their own, and they would maintain it without asking or waiting for a municipal employee to come and do that. So this is what we are trying to mean by design decision, that if we understand the climate, if we understand the culture, if we understand the ethos of that way of life, then at least we don't go against that grain, and we could possibly enhance that space quality to become accessible, to become little more functional and efficient and useful, productive for that neighborhood. This is another design decision about misunderstood way of provision of that amenity or space. We're talking about neighborly space here. You can see on the left-hand side, this is typical environment of a pore, the traditional house form within the walled city of Ahmedabad, which is actually now recognized as UNESCO Heritage Living Quarter. Now you see here that you can call it an encroachment, or you can say it's a blurred interface where you don't know where house extends into the street and street enters the house. But it shows more positivity than the one on the right, which is again a bylaw ensured housing. 15% of the open space has been provided for religiously, but a design flaw that there is no interface. All ends of the houses, not even a window looks into this particular open space, and as a result, even though the space is provided for, the neighborhood doesn't benefit by that. There is no kind of activity it generates. So as a result, it remains idle, eventually abandoned, and therefore encroached by other elements. Okay. Another example, here it's a flaw of a scale of space. Other ones were about the interface with the built and open interface. This one, you can see on the left-hand side, any traditional quarter, open spaces are distributed, and with the kind of pathways, etc., they form an interconnected network of unbuilt spaces. And they are within the kind of threshold, proximity, and the scale of the group of people, rather than all that added up into one large no man's land, as you see on the right hand side. These are again new settlements where again that 15% or whatever is the total is put in one area, where rest of it doesn't necessarily get connected to rest of the built form, and it becomes too large so that it's perhaps only active when there are maybe once in 5 years if there are political rallies or some events or so, but on day-to-day basis, other places are then deprived of any unbuilt space, and this space remains too idle to be used on day-to-day basis. So these are the kinds of things where, as a designer, if we are aware about the context, aware about the kind of grain of the culture and so on and so forth, then, or the context, we might do better. Like here, these are apparently contrasting slides, but tell very, very aptly that these decisions are not about economic availability or a status. It's more in the mindset rather than economics. For example, on the right, one of the most expensive real estate in the world is the Ballard estate in Mumbai. And this are also what you see below are the most beautiful colonial structures and are occupied by one of the wealthiest corporate houses of the country, now of the world. So if you see them from the street side, they're very beautiful picture postcard images. But if you just go to the inner side, the rear side, so to say, you can see that's the context, that there has been a pipeline over a window, which means that you have nothing to do with that side. And that attitude has relegated in Mumbai, where every square inch is forbiddingly expensive. This kind of spaces are abandoned, unused, encroached, and therefore it's a dump yard. And if I may add, so junkies place post business hours. So on a visiting card, it's a very prestigious address, but you don't want to be before and after the office hours there. So why is that? If this was, suppose this was turned to be, it's a very nice, nice scale buildings and nice scale open space. But if everybody entered through it, like our Spanish or Spanish haciendas or Roman clusters, where this would have been a kind of an inner cluster courtyard between three houses, building blocks, and suppose there was a fountain or no fountain. If you entered through this would not have been treated like a back I have nothing to do with. This would have been an equally presentable space, and the street being street, it would always remain so. So it is just a matter of attitude. How do you make people move through? How do you make it not so disjointed from the kind of other aspects of people's movement and interconnectivity, etc. So on the left is the contrast. It's a slum. You can see the kind of houses that it has in the picture below, and it's in the picture up at top. But even though they could have put two more houses here, they have one provided for this collective open space. And not only that, but you can see it is put at a junction of the movement area. It is simply at no cost a raised plinth for a dignity, and a shaded area in the hot climate with the tree, and it has become a very successful group open space. So it's not the money, it's the mindset. It is understanding the ethos of the place and therefore not going wrong in what we provide. One more example, when we're talking about integrated houses, when you're talking about hybrid housing, providing amenities. For example, on the left-hand side, there are these amenities provided, but way disjunct to the living areas. So it remains idle when people are not frequenting this. So even though resources provided, and you can see that it has lived its life. So it's not that it's recently done. You can see the breakages and whatnot. So it's been there around for a while, but it's not occupied. As against one on the right, that there's such a threshold population there, they need certain basic amenities. And if it is not provided by a formal system, all these would come up in proximity of the neighborhood. And that we call encroachment. So if we plan for it from the beginning, knowing that certain kind of things need to be part of a most accessible and proximity area of the dwelling, then that would not be an encroachment, and that would be a kind of a healthy environment or a very efficient and successful, comfortable environment. And finally, even the idea of personalization, identity. And you can see on the left-hand side, it's a self-created or a traditionally grown housing, but this has more variety, this has more diversity, and diversity representing the kind of aspirations as well as whatever circumstances, need of individual users. So it has come about in their own ways, and yet becoming a part of the overall grammar of aesthetics. So it's identity within conformity. And this one, you can only say that come to that blue door or a red door or whatever, Jharokha house, and that is mine. So there is a sense of belonging, very high sense of belonging, as against the one on the right. Today, you're not even permitted to do a balcony with your own color from inside. Architecture ne na bola hai, kind of so it's a very monotonous, doesn't matter how cute one apartment may be, but multiplied 1,000 times, it becomes monotonous. So again, the idea of allowing people for personalization, for growth, for their adaptation to the ways of life. So flexibility is an important factor for all these. And how do we design, keeping in mind that my threshold ends here, things won't go wrong, but here onward, I don't want to encroach, people would do this, that bit. And this used to be very much evident in our vernacular house forms. I mean, if you see these houses, you may not know exactly the location, but you can't go wrong in assuming that this belongs to particular environmental or a climate zone, particular kind of material palette and construction know-how, as well as certain kind of cultural connotation. So this architecture, in a way, was visibly identifiable and so-called a resolution of culture, climate, and construction of the given context, so to say. Just for our general knowledge, I put these names here, where they come from. But I'm afraid it's not possible to infer that in this kind of architectural grammar that we have somehow chosen to adopt. And look at the diversity of the climate zones, cultural ethos, the kind of historic context, etc., etc. And yet outcome is just about the same. And you would very conveniently and innocently believe what I have written. I could have fooled you, and even if I change the names from here to there, it would still work. And why India? Look at this. All of these are from various parts of the world, and put any name anywhere and it works. These are actually taken from there, but just to see that that's what it is. So today, we need to take a pledge and understand what Kerala is us, what Kerala should it be, what kind of living environments in Kerala is it. It is not just going to copy that, but at least understanding the positivity of the ethos of the given cultural context, given place, given way of life, given environmental context, which Jaipur is more better, accessible, livable, which Kolkata should we be designing for. So with that, our design decisions have to be multi-perspective, and it has to answer the call of all these 5 basic design criteria. The aesthetic, timeless aesthetic, because architecture arguably lasts beyond us, and at least living environment tend to be generation long possession. So how what is valid and nice, so to say, now remains so even after a few generations. Sociocultural appropriateness, that we're designing for someone to live in. It's neither an institute nor a office building. It is for somebody's way of life, and therefore it has to be appropriate to the sociocultural context of the inhabitants. Environmental sustainability, that is resource management, that how do we augment, because our design decision, and especially in mass housing, where even our mistakes perpetuate as many number of times, and even a small little difference that we make at one end would multiply to become a collective benefit. In fact, a lot of aspects we may not be able to do it in a smaller scale development. Here is a great opportunity to be able to augmenting either the economics or environmental benefits in a collective scale. Economic affordability, without that, things won't be feasible, and structural strength, because as I say, it has to last longer than even our lifespans. So what it requires, especially when we call living environment, that it's for others. So we have to learn to sustainability rhymes with humility. We have to learn to shade our ego. And ego is a preconceived notion. Okay. But context needs to generate. And as architect, as designer, we are multiply responsible. First, any development, we are changing the existing landscape. So as alterer of landscape, we need to know that what we are doing is better, far better rather than what was there, and we are making it worse. Second, you can see how much of energy, water, and the resources do we consume, and how much of waste do we produce. So we have to be responsible at that. And third, as I say, that even if we make a mistake, building lasting longer than us would be, even our mistake would perpetuate for a longer time. So the point about design is that it's not about finding one answer to one question. It's not as simple, as quick as that. Okay, I was looking for, prefabricated construction and I've done this. No, that's single. But even if you do the prefab, has it answered the call of diversity? Has it answered the call of certain kind of quality of living environment, and so and so forth? So it is about asking many questions, finding many answers to each of these questions, and then picking one answer that answers most to all questions. So it's about discretion, it's about adding values, and it's about ability to discern between appropriate and inappropriate. There's nothing like good or bad. It's always appropriate or inappropriate. And appropriateness with respect to place, people, and the other context. So with all that, for the short of time, I have skipped a module on evolution of house form over ages. But just to kind of quickly recall, there are 3 phases to that development. One was about prehistoric, the pre-urban development or prehistoric development, which refers to before the first civilization. Then first civilization to the 20th century, or let's say industrialization, and then the post-industrialization, so to say. So if you look at the first attempt, people tried to be part of existing crevices just as a shelter. Like in Turkey, Cappadocia, or many places, people live in caves and those kind of things to simply protect them from vagaries of weather or some enemies, or so to say. Then you started becoming a food gatherer, and therefore you stayed close to the resources for living, for livelihood, in terms of like where there was fruit, where there was vegetation, where you could kind of survive. And therefore, the kind of house that we did was using twigs, branches, thatch, etc., and the arms rich, so that there was no real tool and technology. And that's why you see these bamboo huts, where it just as much your arm can reach, and you tie the bamboo or the twig on top, and that becomes your shelter, and you pad it up with the vegetation for cold climate or so on and so forth. But then animals came, and kind of you had to protect yourself. So you started finding ways to defend and offend. So from food gatherer, you became a hunter. And as hunter now, you could master the animals, and therefore it became domesticated. And therefore you got a vehicle to move here and there on horse, on yak, on reindeer, and likewise. And also you had added kitty of your building material, which was the animal hide, the skin, even the oil, that is the fat and bone and so forth. So you started creating then a collective for a family, a larger unit, where now you could span a little more like, uh, you know, sort of a Mongolian yurt or so. But that is also an example. Now that you had a animal, etc., you could mobilize yourself and move from place to place. Now, when you moved from place to place, there was a social structure in terms of emergence of a chief who you paid allegiance to. And now the mobile structure, the nomadic lifestyle, had to be lightweight and easy and quick to assemble and disassemble. So Bedouin tent and the Mongolian ute, which like a that toy of the snake, it can just bundle of reed open up to become a cylinder, and on top you can put animal hide or cloth or something. So that then, because you moved from place to place, you begin to understand seasons, so that you don't have to wander aimlessly. You could be in one season in one area and another season in another area, and that led to seasonal dwelling. Then, having understood the season, you said that you don't even have to move. In a monsoon, if you saw your seeds, it would grow and you have enough grains to last for the whole year. So that came to be agrarian society, and agrarian society, you begin to settle, and eventually permanent dwelling at the same place with aggregate agriculture as a base. That led to first civilization near the fertile land of all the four civilizations around all the four rivers. And characteristic of that, I'm saying that because a lot of those we carry even till today, or until recently, I would put it that way, which was deep, long houses, rectilinear houses from all pre-urban form were all circular, because now you knew the technology how to resolve. You did not want to waste space, because for agriculture, you wanted to keep more area, so you compacted your build form. So very compact fabric, maybe 2 to 3 sites minimum shared with the neighbor. So more build form within a small site. Walking distances. They were supplied with drainage, water supply, so amenities and services. So collectively started, because there was a concept of citizenship now that has evolved, that there is a division of role, that you do this, other one does this, and together there is a system created. So that was, therefore it was like a citizenship. And house form was deep, long, shared walls in a row. And now when you have a deep, long house, you needed something for light, ventilation, and view, that is a courtyard. And all the four early civilization were around a kind of a warm climate, and therefore courtyard became the DNA of all these civilization development, or genealogy, so to say. So courtyard houses and shared walls, so the row houses, which somewhere got called as town houses, somewhere the court houses, etc. So this is what is the way we then can see this sort of typologies evolving here. And a lot of these change. See, even in the medieval ages, we continued to build compactly with a similar build form and tight uh, fabric, because we could mend the periphery better. uh, if it is too widespread, then you have vulnerability about being able to defend larger perimeter. Likewise, there would be loose pockets. So it continued all the way till Middle Ages. Only around 16th century, around Renaissance, 14th, 16th century, after when there was a cannonball invented, so fortification was no longer an effective strategy to be able to defend yourself. And therefore, from a far distance, if the cannonball was thrown, it could destroy the entire settlement of the middle kind. And therefore, it broke the bounds, and you started creating garden cities. You came out and you had to change your defense mechanism to actually send your army further down and fend yourself rather than being protected in a wall. So how one technology changed the entire city plan, and fact that now you could move out, the idea of open space integrated within number of houses, that gave rise to speculative development, that now a developer would create collective housing with open space, with infrastructure, with amenity, as a hybrid housing to group of people. So it was not your own house, which you do everything about. It was then a collective. And final change and major departure after industrialization, with the mobility of car, there came suburb, and people started living in one place and working in another place. And that displacement, or that division, which also meant that a lot of downtowns became dead and therefore crime prone, because when there was nobody at night, it became free for the antisocial elements to occupy, and so on and so forth. And therefore, again, that reversal of the policies, like in Montreal, just to combat that evil very naturally and effectively, rather than giving punitive actions, they started coming or giving incentives, that a young couple, if it wants to, live in a downtown, the government would give $20,000 subsidy, so that when there is a family there, when there's a young kid there, the street is not deserted at night. There's activity, there is occupation, there are kids playing, and therefore it would check the antisocial activity, the prostitution, etc. And they have actually a very positive results as a result of that. So that's the idea of the quick development of how we have come about. And in fact, we've come down to this tower dwellings and pros and cons of that. So that is something that I want to now take up as the design issue when we land in present day times and the demands and situations. So 20th century or even 21st century, the kind of building type, housing type that we have, single family dwelling units, one of the most luxurious form is the bungalow. The word bungalow comes from Bangla, where the British established its first colony. So East India colony, that is. But the characteristic feature is that it's in a compound, it's detached, from all sides. So naturally, it's not in terms of density very effective. So it's luxury. It is also antisocial. It's kind of antisocial, meaning it's independent, indifferent to each other. It doesn't create a community. Semi-detached, that was a version better adapted, where at least you would touch the sides. It's kind of tenements or a twin or whatnot. More effective there. So it retains the quality of a bungalow, but it's little more efficient in design in terms of land occupancy. But the most effective are the row houses, the attached from all sides. Actually, that did come all the way from the first civilization to even medieval times, etc. Then the idea of multi-dwelling, multi-family dwelling. So it's not one dwelling for one family, multiple families live in that, where one is a walk-up range, so 5-story ground plus 4 is up to which legally it is called walk-up, where you may not need elevators in legal provisions. For convenience, yes. Then there is something called mid-rise, something like 6 to 8 stories, a mid-rise development, and 8, 10-story and onward is a high-rise in Indian definition. So it might still change with, like overseas, you have 100-story and whatnot, which so far we are not. We are probably talking till 40 stories right now, which are point block towers. So those are the kind of typologies we have. What are the inherent qualities and limitations? So when we talk of bungalow, it is conducive to transition from suburban to urban. There's flexibility of orientation. There's a growth potential. It supports the family unit in terms of play area for children. Elderly can come out and flex their muscles and be free, and it's a low density. As I say, it came from that Bangla, and therefore it was in response to hot, humid climate with transparency to breeze, multi-tiered roof so that air can flow through. It could shelter from sun and rain, therefore veranda, and it was extroverted. So the life happened because of the comfort condition in veranda. Now, when it is in veranda, then you need privacy. Therefore, there was a compound with a setback and a distance. Try and build a bungalow without a setback. You will feel naked there. Okay. So these are the consequences, and these are the kind of types that there are. So we see that in Goa, we see that in many places. It's a colonial hangover like this. So the life was in veranda, and a kind of even a staggered louvered door, so that even the things inside. Now, the comparison, the point to keep in mind is that central most space. Let me go back here. In the section, the most central space is closed, and it's a big hall for banquet and party, which means that the most inner space was the most public space. A total reversal of a courtyard houses, where courtyard was the most private space. And if you conquer the courtyard, you have invaded the whole house in terms of its privacy, in terms of its life, and so on and so forth. Semi-detached house, where at least one side you could connect. So it's same, but as a bungalow, but you are able to squeeze it a little more for the land needs. Share it from two sides, and now certain characteristics change. It's still a single person dwelling, but there is an orientation to street. So this starts getting streetwardly. It's a little more high density, and at least to the walk-up, it can compete quite better. But when you have put it in a row, the design could make a difference. For example, left-hand side, you can say it's a row. It's a mala, typical malas of the Mumbai, but it looks like a chawl. Chawl in the sense that you go in that corridor and affecting everybody's privacy. You go from one end to the other, which actually in a design term was bettered as a typology. In the right-hand side, the British houses, where you can see there is something called a bay window, which in our case was Jharokha. So bay window extends the floor little out, so that in a row house, when you have blinkered from two sides kind of a point of view, you can step out and you can get at least 180-degree view of the street. So that's how, knowing the limitation of that typology, how design can make a difference. So like here you can see in an urban context, that row house, just a little projection of the floor, this bay window, and it can do huge kind of difference to the quality within. But the major discussion that I want to hold is on this high rise versus low rise as a type of design, I mean, living quarter that you decide for. I'm not saying which one is what should be there or not. I have my own bias for a given threshold, and that's all I want to kind of discuss here with sort of, not just emotional, but also logical and arithmetic kind of equations. What are the advantages of a high rise on a given plot? So the high rise implies high density because you can build more on as many floors that you can go above. Therefore, you can probably build on a smaller footprint and release a lot of land, which is positive. Therefore, now you have to understand where there was a town housing, and that was making it very compact, and the same townhouses now became multi-dwelling units. That is the historical kind of correlation to this. So instead of one family in one house, stacked over floors, you had one brother living in one floor, another brother or another tenant on another floor. So it started becoming multi-dwelling, but on a same footprint, so to say. So when sites were shared, and then each floor had to have its kitchen and other activity, that inner rooms got constrained in terms of light and ventilation. So therefore, in this, now that you could build higher up and you could open your sides and you could improve the light and ventilation. In the beginning, long views were fascinating, and not as going vertical, but because many units can be put together, you could have shared facilities. For example, you cannot in an individual building or individual unit, maybe not able to afford a santri or a security guard, but for 40 blocks, 40 people in that block, you might be able to share that cost as 1/40th, and you can have that. You may not have individually a swimming pool, but for 40, you might be able to share that facility. So that become accessible to a group of people. So these are the kind of advantages of a collective dwelling and vertically grown one. But what are the inherent applications? And I'm saying this, that once we recognize that these go as part and parcel of this typology, how through design we can improve that, we can overcome the limitation, we can enhance the potentials. Okay. So first one is a strained interaction, out of sight, out of mind. Okay. And this is very, very evident. We have witnessed, I always say that your neighboring person might be perhaps 9 inches away with a partition wall, a party wall between the two. But the one above or below is only 4.5 inches or 6 inches away from you with the slab. But the person on top, you don't know much about him. You don't know the positives of him, but there is a likelihood that you might probably consider him notionally your enemy, because his toilet is leaking on yours and you're giving gali to him every day. He comes late and is walking and the noise doesn't get you sleep. His kids are jumping in the afternoon and your false ceiling is shaking and you get a little frightened. So you know nothing about somebody who's arguably the closest to you, as against somebody in the opposite balcony, and you know everything about it. Often, you see that a very pretty girl is coming in the balcony at about 7:45 to dry the towel and then comb her hair. And then suddenly you say, your mother, give me the towel, I want to dry it in the balcony. And mother wonders, how come suddenly you became so obedient and so kind of serious about all these domestic chores. So you know more about the samne wali khirki and samne wali balcony, because the out of cone of vision, out of sight, out of mind. Whereas against the far, what you can see, you can relate to, you know about it, and it is likely to create that bond. What this out of sight thing means is also the sense of indifference. Sense of indifference where I have nothing to do with it. What is it for me, kind of a thing. And as a result, there has been studies about the crime rate. You probably know this book, Christopher Alexander's Pattern Language. One second, there is a noise. ये खिड़की बंद करो नहीं आवाज कहाँ से? Even shut these two doors. चलो अब बारी पर दरवाजा बंद करो. Sorry. So there's a pattern language, the book, and that has with the research, the figures that say that the crime rate on the third floor of the same building is less than half of that of the 13th floor. Just imagine, you might be sharing a space in an elevator with a mugger or a murderer, but you can't say him no, or you don't even know him. You might even maybe at the most smile and you would be part of it, but in an empty lobby of a particular floor, you would not even know what somebody's doing. So it's inherent aspect, which is the part of that typology. So that sense of indifference brings that. And I can at least tell a very known story right in front of my house. Ours is a individual home, but front of us, where we enter that street, is an apartment, not high-rise apartment, even though it's 5-story duplex sort. What had actually happened maybe now a decade ago, that they have a security guard. We don't have one. They have security guard. In late morning, 2 people came in disguised as a plumber. In fact, they asked the security guard on a ground floor house that there is an uncle living there and he has asked us to do his plumbing. So we are here. So actually security guard pressed the bell and they somehow managed to push inside and say, security guard, okay, thank you. And once they went inside, they stepped this person. Now, with this system, nobody around knew about it, but being a ground floor unit, the window was open and a maid of the neighborhood was just passing by. So the typical tendency of looking around here and there, and she saw from a road, from the street, out of in the window, to see that something is not happening right. And she raised the alarm, she screamed, and people gathered. So that's the point, that why that difference in the safety rate or sort of crime rate, because from the street also you can police till about certain floors because of our cone of vision reaching up to that. Okay. The other factor is that of interactivity, that we don't see. If can you imagine, and I've seen the notice even in the elevator, that children below age of 5 years not allowed to use the elevator. So now these toddlers are confined to their homes. Whenever daddy or mummy or grandpa can take them out, that's only when they can go out. So their growth is truncated, or their, sort of routine is shrunk. Same way, the elderly, they can, even though elevator, they cannot come down to give send off to the son, then go up, have tea, then come down to chat, then go up for meal. It doesn't work. As against an open space right at the same level, they can even come out and sit in a veranda or in a balcony like that. So that's the other factor, and therefore a need for a personal open space at the same level, not a big garden at the base. So children, elderly, and the homemaker and their problem. And third, even from the economics point of view, it's a fallacy to think that these are cheap. Actually, everything is anti-gravity. So your services run against the gravity, and they are mechanized, and therefore they are more energy intensive as well as expensive. And therefore even maintenance needs are high. In a high rise, have you known the kind of ever time the struggle or the fight that person living on ground and first floor or second floor would say, hell with your elevator, we don't want to pay anything for that maintenance. You people don't know how to use it and we end up paying maintenance, we don't want to. And the poor fellow of the ninth floor cannot do anything but to ensure that elevator is running for him. Okay. Then with the earthquake consideration, higher you go, like after the earthquake and the kind of legal requirement of the reinforcement, there is nearly 5 to 10% additional reinforcement per floor that you have to think about for the wind load, for the lateral thrust, for the horizontal thrust. So it's in all an economically drained. And why I'm saying this is that no, I mean, everybody who can afford can do that. But for like in Mumbai, to have these slum people live in this where most of their life is outdoors, their houses are small, so they want to live outdoors, their economic activities outdoors, their relation with the street is what gives them the economic sustainability. And their level of affordability to be able to maintain the number of elevators, etc., is not so. So for them, is this the right typology? So you have to think for who it is right. So this was the kind of sprawl of a neighborhood, which is what Corbusier in fact said that this can be all put now at the advent of concrete and later elevator after the industrialization in the beginning of 20th century. So he said that we can put it in one kind of a block, and that's how it came about. But look at it, at what threshold it starts making sense, and till that threshold, there is other alternative which is far more better. For example, this is only a simulation for FSI1, and let us understand, India does not mean Mumbai, Gurgaon, and certain parts of Chennai or Calcutta. How much of Calcutta even today is low rise? How much of Chennai is low rise? How much of Delhi? Even how much of Mumbai go to original parts of Bandra, Worli, Bhuleshwar, and all that, and it's still low to mid rise. So don't kind of get too caught up by only the soaring skylines. So this is why I'm saying that still many places 1.2 FSI prevail. And so if you were to think that, okay, just look at this, that both cubes, which means the volume is same, the quantity is same, the cost is same. But if think this as a truffle cake, in one I cut slice vertically, then everybody gets the crust and everybody gets the cream or the cherry. Same cake. That is a row house. That is a traditional houses of any part of old city. The one on the right is an apartment where it's the same cake, but I'm slicing horizontally. So somebody gets the crust, somebody the sponge, and somebody the cherry on top or cream on top. So it's how you cut it. And that's why till walk up, row houses are far more efficient because everybody can expand, nobody has to be bothered about top person's toilet to be leaking, and everybody gets the ground and the terrace for their own use and identity. Now let's look at the right, about amount of open space. Say if you have one FSI, to get full FSI and only on one floor, you have to build 100%, which means 0% open space. That is no good. The moment you go 2 floors, you have already released 50% of open space. So at least something good. You go 4 floors and you have released 75% open space, and 4-story, you can still walk up. But now you go 10-story as an example, for the same threshold of FSI or density, you have released 90%. So 15% more than that 4-story limit, but 15% is just a small increase in open space as against the consequence of 2.5 times stacking of this 4-story unit, which is more severe. It demands the elevator and it creates all these other issues which the 4-story tends to avoid. So you have to know that till that threshold, there's no need to go to that type. It could be your choice, but not a force. Why only one FSI? Here is a simulation that says that you can see 2.2, 2.5 even in a walk-up with everybody getting terrace. Okay, like ground floor, you can cover 60%, so you have 40% open space, 60, 40, 50, 40, 30, a standard progression, and you get 2. But don't forget our upper floors tend to project out so that when sun is overhead, you could cast the whole facade in shadow. So when you do all that, and even 2.2, 2.4 FSI is very doable without any compromise on any aspect in 4 to 5-story building. So this is just to remember that till this, it is your choice to go high rise, but not a compulsion. About, again, the type with vis-a-vis the default open space. In the left-hand side pair, you see that suppose it was 70 feet by 70 feet plot and you left 10 feet margin. As you can see, this reticulation diagram or theory, 7 by 7, so 70 by 70, 4,900 square feet, of which just 10 feet margin leaves you with 50 by 50, which means 2,500. So from 49 square, you're reduced to 25 squares, which is just about half. So 50% of land has gone as open space, simply fizzled out into that 10-foot margin. Okay, so that is the kind of issue. And the 10-foot margin, although 50% of your ground coverage has been consumed, that 10-foot margin is good for, not good for being able to park car, not good to plant a big tree. Kids can't play there. You can't have collective gathering. Just reverse it, like this perimeter block. You have the same density, same FSI, same built up, but now, and same amount of open space, but now 50 by 50 is a kind of a cluster courtyard. You get 50 feet by 50 feet, which means that you can at least have 4 to 6 trees. You can have 50 people, about 200 people gathering there. Children can play there, and you can have something like 12 cars or so parked there. Okay, so that is the kind of difference. Just by reversing this footprint can we create. So we have to also understand not only the quality, but also the way quantitatively we lose out by choosing a different type. And this is where you can see this is a simulation for about 1.6, 1.8 FSI. Both of these, you have to just trust that both are same. But typically, what we see in urban areas is what is there on the right. And we think there's no choice other than that. And we are happy by seeing these isolated needles as an urban form, as against the same is doable and was the part of our left-hand side, where you can see it creates intermediate open spaces. There's a sense of neighborhood. There are terraces, and there is a street formation, which is where on a ground floor you would have shops, upper floor you might have some offices, and then the top floor could be institute, and likewise in Jaipur, So it's one of the nicest streets. So this is what we need to be aware of. And then now, if you choose to go high rise or beyond the threshold, if you have to go high rise, then what are the design obligations of that? Okay. For example, here it tries to say, literally, this is by architect Yashwant Mistry, who just passed away from Vadodara. This was his design in Ahmedabad called Naimesh Park, and it literally wants to say bungalow in the sky. Now, its aesthetic may be arguable, you might say it's faking, but at least the notion, at least the direction, at least the kind of idea holds that this tries to give outdoor space, this tries to give identity, this tries to give a different kind of image, etc. Well, that may be arguable. Here is from the Bhagavan, architect Charles Correa, may his soul rest in peace, and what he left behind in Kanchenjunga, that actually it's like a duplex with huge terraces, personal terraces, privacy ensured, okay? And if you see this enlarged plan on the right, if you see that it just feels like a duplex interlocked one above the other. You have variety of spaces, volume. One can look over from your own space if it happens to be a larger one. And on the left-hand side with this colorful diagram, you can see that there was smart interlocking so that the volumes was not wasted. Everything was not standard 10 feet floor, okay? But each house felt like a bungalow. It had an open space, overlooking space, double height area, internal volume, so that upper floor is not cut off, and so on and so forth. You can even think of vegetation. And in Mumbai with a dense this thing, but once you go higher up, the advantage of creating private open spaces. And as the plans show, it was not just one open space. It got every bedroom an open space, and sometimes even the services, which culturally we do need kind of an open space. So that is the example. And here are the model studies. This one is in Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia, with a socialist kind of outcome, where housing is a government obligation. It is the citizen's right, and therefore it's a concrete jungle, everybody. So even in that, what I liked was, and this is some more than 2.5 decades ago image, that you can see it's about 14-story building, but it has been receded at every fourth or so floor, so that you can see the ground floor is like a bungalow or a duplex or a triple with a row house. Its terrace becomes then kind of an outdoor area for a 4-story walk-up. Then again, that sets back to create that terrace as a ground for the topmost 4 floors. So intermediate collective scale terraces, and thereby the ground floor can be treated differently than the upper floor. So upper floors are apartment, but lower 4 floors are a duplex over a duplex kind of a row houses or a bungalow or whatever you call it. So can you not mix the types? So the hybrid doesn't only mean the shop and other integration, it also means can you not combine different type? And very sensibly here, it is not just hodgepodge. And as I say, that counter spaces, the terraces become a useful extension of the upper, and every 4 floors get that, This is Nakagin Tower in Tokyo, and in urban area, the downtown space is very, very tight, and therefore it came up with prefabricated panels, and it's called a capsule house where all you need is what is there. It's just about this, and yet there are variations. It's all anchored through a high tension bolt here, and this is what you have. You need a fridge and television and now computer, and you get all that, but that's just about the kind of space that it has. Now, having built vertically up, can you not treat it with other facilities within? So this is another example of a hybrid way back in 1964. This is Marina City, Bertrand Goldberg, the architect, and the Chicago as the context. This is the time of Al Capone's. And that time security in downtown was a problem. Even until 2000, this was an issue that downtown used to be deserted because people live in suburb. Now here in downtown, when there's a residential community, now with this many number of people coming together, they could afford a machine guard machine gun guard for security, so they could find safety in there. Then you can see that there are parking. These lower circles are for parking. Then there is a lounge and a club. The lower one has a marina, the backwater thing. You can have your boat parked there. Everybody gets the terrace, and then you have other facilities like swimming pool and whatnot in there. And it is connected to metro, so your connectivity is there. So it's called Marina City, just because most of the things you have within. And so now the idea of collective facilities within that. So in high rise, now the shared facilities can be augmented. Now, of course, this were richer families and they could escape in weekend to their weekend houses. So that sense of confinement and all that was less felt by them. This is what Corbusier, when I showed that diagram, had promoted, that now that we have concrete and we can go vertically up. And he was essentially responding to that very dense townhouses, which one family became multi-family and was affected by the ventilation. So this is Unit d'Habitation in Paris by Le Corbusier. And yet in this, he left the ground floor as pilotis for shaded street for the city, so people could pass by that, they could interact each other there. So it was not meant to be isolated. And then is designed. So that was the kind of comparison you can see on the left top, that the urban sprawl of that can be reduced to that much of a footprint. And even in that, the built is so much, so the rest can be garden, etc., amenities, etc. And he created intermediate floor circulation corridor, which would be good for 2 to 3 floors simultaneously. So you don't need corridor at every floor, and corridor became like a street to connect each other also. And most important, the top floor became common facility, including swimming pool, including kids area, which we often forget. Even Bombay, where we crib about open space, we don't make terraces count for things, you know. So this is way he thought terrace to be. And this is the duple. So even though it's an apartment, you can see a central corridor, which can serve 2 apartments and 3 floors simultaneously. So in one apartment, you enter at the lower floor, low level of that apartment. And in the other apartment, you enter at the upper level of apartment, both being living spaces. So this is how, even in an apartment typology, he tried to. So this became a neighborly street, so to say. For a climate, it might be shut from outside, but you can look out. And this way, each house was standardized in terms of its overall skeleton and the volume, but inside you could do it in different ways. So these are the different ways the layout could be augmented, you can see. So flexibility within that. And this is my most favorite one, Moshe Shafti, Montreal, called Habitat 67. In 67, it was actually a demonstration of precast housing with, because it's a severe climate and how 6 months of the winter you can't work there. So precast concrete as an example of concrete houses, it was done. But way back in 67, even though vertically stacked, it tried to provide for terraces. In fact, in a cold climate where it's not as much used, still people love it for the 3 months that they can. But I personally feel I would have, even today, I desire that somebody can simply copy this. And to me, I think for India, this might be a great housing. Now, precast unit, even that prism is precast. It's kind of, 12-story units, and 354 cubes, like prisms like this, and the area varying from 600 to 5,000 square feet. So you can see you could achieve a lot of variations and variety. So in area as well as its spatial configuration. So you get more than one terraces, etc. This you can see the big cross lines. So they were hollowed out square beams, as they also became a duct to have the service conduits pass through that. So the column and beam was in situ, while these units were plugged onto it. And you can see that even within, there were 16 variations in which you could permute and combine the unit and increase areas and still get terraces, etc. And this is the way the layout came together. And this is how each prism even could be made up of different panels. This was his vision and idea. This are the sky bridges. So the conduit you can see in a section, it's actually one taking the pipe, but that becomes a cross bridges to connect from one end to the other, so that neighborhood is not isolated at upper floors. This is the stage-wise construction. So you have the plinth, you have the units being brought in, and with self-balancing. The first unit would be off balance to support for a while, but now you put a counterweight of the next and it stabilizes. And you can see these are cross bridges. The units don't look like an isolated needle. So even as an urban form, it maintains the streetness of it with the contiguity of mass. There are people looking out at different levels, and you can even in the void like this look to each other, so like for example, at the intermediate level, there is an open space, and if child is playing there, you don't mind sending the child there, because you can look from there and it's safe from vehicle, etc. The ground floor is all the services, the laundry, etc. I don't know, you can see in this window somebody standing there and trying to look out. So these are the intermediate spaces. So the elderly can come out, children can come out, private spaces. You can see that even 3 months of summer, they enjoy the landscape as well as personalization with outdoor activity overlooking the Lashid Rapids, the river in front. And you can see cascading form overlooking terraces. So you have interactivity with visual continuity also with the neighbor and personalization. And this is all precast. So the most severe conditions are constraint, and yet you can do this. Ground floor is also where you can grow your stuff. So personalization even on the land. That's the way it maximizes the view to the river. Everybody, even from their own house, gets that view. And just to say that even the low-rise units, this is Atelier 5, which was in modernism heydays and learned from Corbusier kind of disciples. This is in Bern, outskirts of Bern, but a kind of very long, deep row houses in a cold climate, which deserves to be more for us in a warm climate. You can see the section, you can see there is a front garden. At the back, there is a courtyard. Also, the rearmost, you'll see the image like this. I mean, culturally, the interactivity demands are low, and still you have this kind of housing, terrace housing with upper floor gardens, personal gardens and extensions. So 60s, people tried for this kind of living quarter with reasonable densities. You talk about green today, this is 70 years ago. Look at the intermediate spaces and biker wall. This was at the edge of the highway. And again, that most of the densities, again, example of a hybrid where different types are combined so that most of the thing is taken care of by this external one, which is vertical. So as a result, the rest could be low rise. And even that vertical, the the design fun was in the way the internal corridor and the balconies became a collective space like this. So you could have things to come out to looking into internal space and like this. So externally, to cut out the noise of the expressway, it was a wall. So it's also known as a biker wall, but it does come up with the outdoor extensions and all as you made. So ground floor, you can see, is like a bungalow or like a row house. It has its own yards, while upper floor come into this collective, the long terrace, while the individual terrace. So this might be a broader house like that. This is an example of expandable homes and how mixed use thing as well, that units, ground floor, one floor, what works where, and the same can add up to these different conditions. Front facade, ground floor shop, upper floor offices, you can expand this even further. So that's a kind of a first part of that presentation, talking about when is high-rise a compulsion versus still what threshold. It may be your choice. Now, if you do choose to go high-rise, it comes with its own demands to make it humane. And for that, humanizing the vertical, what are the kind of design solutions or obligations, I would put it that way. And we saw some case studies positively trying to do that. So this is one part. If you have some questions on this, we can take. Otherwise, we can take exactly 8-minute break for your tea and oxygen and resume soon. Is there any pressing question right now?
Participants, if you have any questions,
all right. So
type in, speak,
in my
whatever.
watch, it is 10:15. Can we